everyone. Welcome back to the class of Indian Writing in English. Today we are going to begin very popular fiction An Astrologer's Day written by R.K. Narayan. Let's start with R.K. Narayan. R.K. Narayan was born on 10th October 1906 in Madras, Tamil Nadu, India, into an Iyer Brahmin family. R.K. Narayan was one of the most important English language Indian fiction authors. He is widely regarded as one of India's best novelists. He created a realistic and immersive experience for his audience by bringing small town India to them. R.K. Narayan was a well-known English author of Indian literature. The full name of R.K. Narayan was Rasipuram Krishnaswamy Iyer Narayana Swamy. He was an Indian writer best known for his works set in the fictional South Indian town of Malgudi. Along with Mulk Raj Anand and Raja Rao, he was a leading author of early Indian literature in English. Narayan emphasizes his characters' social background and day-to-day lives. He has been compared to William Faulkner, who built a similar fictional town and explored the vitality of daily life with humor and compassion. Due to his ability to simplify a plot, Narayan's short stories have been compared to those of Guy de Maupassant. Next, we are going through early life and education of R.K. Narayan. R.K. Narayan's father was a school principal, and Narayan attended some of his father's classes. Narayan spent part of his childhood with his maternal grandmother Parvati, since his father's work required frequent transfers. Narayan attended a number of Madras schools while living with his grandmother. He learned arithmetic, mythology, classical Indian music, and Sanskrit from his grandmother. Narayan was an avid reader who grew up on Dickens, Wodehouse, Arthur Conan Doyle, and Thomas Hardy. When his father was transferred to Maharaja's College High School, Narayan moved to Mysore to live with his family. His reading habit was fueled by the school's well-stocked library as well as his father's, and he began writing as well. After failing the university entrance exam, after graduating from high school, Narayan spent a year at home reading and writing before passing the exam in 1926 and enrolling in Maharaja College of Mysore. Narayan received his bachelor's degree in 4 years. He briefly worked as a school teacher but resigned in protest when the school's headmaster requested him to fill in for the physical training master. The experience persuaded Narayan that writing was his only choice, and he decided to stay at home and write novels. Next, we are going through R.K. Narayan's career as a writer. He began writing local interest articles for English newspapers and magazines occasionally. Despite the low pay, he had a normal life and few needs, and his family and friends appreciated and embraced his unconventional career choice. Swami and Friends, Narayan's first book, was mocked by his uncle and rejected by a number of publishers in 1930. The novel was based on several incidents from his own childhood and was semi-autobiographical. Narayan worked as a reporter for The Justice, a Madras-based publication devoted to non-Brahmins' rights. He came into contact with a wide range of people and concerns as a result of his work. Narayan had sent the manuscript of Swami and Friends to an Oxford acquaintance who had shown it to Graham Greene around this time. The book was eventually published in 1935 after Greene recommended it to his publisher. Greene also advised Narayan to shorten his name so that it would be more recognizable to an English-speaking audience. R.K. Narayan's second book, The Bachelor of Arts, was influenced in part by his college experiences and dealt with the theme of a rebellious adolescent transitioning to a rather well-adjusted adult. It was published in 1937 by a different publisher on Greene's suggestion. His third novel, The Dark Room, dealt with marital strife, portraying the man as the oppressor and the woman as the victim inside a marriage, and was published in 1938 by a different publisher. R.K. Narayan's fourth novel was The English Teacher. This book is autobiographical, which was almost entirely based on his own life, along with different names for the characters and a different setting in Malgudi. Narayan tried his hand at publishing a journal, Indian Thought, in 1940. Narayan was able to get over 1,000 subscribers in Madras city along with the aid of his uncle. Malgudi Days, his first book of short stories, was published in November 1942 and The English Teacher in 1945. Narayan founded his own publishing house, Indian Thought Publications, which was a successful and is still in operation today, run by his granddaughter. Around this time, Narayan wrote the screenplay for the Gemini Studios film Miss Malini, which was the only story he ever completed for the screen. R.K. Narayan's next novel, Mr. Sampath, was a more imaginative and creative external style compared to the semi-autobiographical tone of the earlier novels. In 1951, he published The Financial Expert. Waiting for the Mahatma, a novel loosely based on Mahatma Gandhi's fictional visit to Malgudi, was published in 1955. The Guide, his next book, was written while he was on a Rockefeller Fellowship in the United States in 1956. Through his work, Narayan's greatest accomplishment was to portray India to the rest of the world. He gave his readers beautiful stories to look forward to about Malgudi and its inhabitants, and he is widely regarded as one of India's best novelists. Malgudi was more than just a fictional Indian town. It was also a hive of characters, each with their own quirks and attitudes, making the situation feel as familiar to the reader as if it was set in their own backyards. In this semester, we are going to enjoy R.K. Narayan's very famous work, An Astrologer's Day. Let me narrate the brief summary of short fiction, An Astrologer's Day. An unnamed village in India, an astrologer lays out his tools of the trade, a mix of cowrie shells, obscure charts, a notebook, and other such curious. I think all of you are very familiar with the astrologer. Astrologer is a person who uses astrology to tell others about their character or to predict their future. We know it well. Astrologer has so many tools for their trade. Cowrie shells are very important in astrology. You have seen cowrie shells. What it is? Small white shells often used in Indian astrology and by children as a substitute for dice. So here we can see that astrologer has cowrie shells, obscure or puzzling charts, a notebook, and other such unusual objects which are used to his profession. They serve no purpose but to create the illusion of mysticism. Actually, they are using these tools to attract the people, to make them believe. The astrologer has also painted his forehead with sacred ash, wrapped or covered his head in a turban, and seated himself and his gear beneath a large tree. All of these things serve to give him an air of wisdom, transcendence, or prominence, and prophetic power. Though the narrator is quick to point out that none of these qualities actually belong to the man. We can't see these qualities in a common man. The astrologer has set up his little shop amidst a busy marketplace among people fencing stolen goods, presenting the same cheap food as a variety of government delicacies and auctioning of low quality fabrics. The astrologer, quickly established as a fraud, is in the company of other fraudsters and spin doctors selling their wares and making their livings. ഈ മാർക്കറ്റിൽ ഭക്ഷണം വിൽക്കുന്നവരായാലും വസ്ത്രങ്ങൾ വിൽക്കുന്നവരായാലും പലതരത്തിലുള്ള സാധനങ്ങൾ വിൽക്കുന്നവരായാലും അവരൊക്കെ തന്നെ വളരെ ചീപ്പായിട്ട് ജീവിക്കാനുള്ള വക കണ്ടെത്തുന്ന ആൾക്കാരാണ്. അത്തരത്തിലുള്ള ചതിയന്മാരുടെ ഇടയിലാണ് മറ്റൊരു ചതിയുടെ പരിവേഷവുമായി ഈ ആസ്ട്രോളജർ തൻ്റെ കസ്റ്റമേഴ്സിനായി കാത്തിരിക്കുന്നത്. Marketplace is lit by various shop lights and flyers, the dancing shadows of which enhance the astrologer's mystical quality. Actually, this place is very suitable for astrologer. It increases his mystical quality. He notably has no light of his own, but simply borrows that of the other vendors. The astrologer had never had any intention of becoming one, but had been forced to leave his ancestral home and travel several hundred miles away with no plan and no money. He reached in this place as an astrologer. In reality, he didn't want to become an astrologer. We can say that his fate is forced him to act as an astrologer. That's why he reached in this place without any plan and money. Even so, he is a convincing holy man, using his own insights into human problems to offer vague but comforting advice to people in the market. He hasn't any idea about astrology. He used his practical knowledge to perform as an astrologer. That's why he is giving very comforting advices to the people in the market. He functions as a sort of therapist, offering self-affirming advice that he wraps in the guise of astrological wisdom. He is good at his trade. He tells people what they want to hear, and they live comforted by it. Though it is not an honest living that the astrologer makes, it is still a well-earned one. By practice, he became the master in astrology. He knows very well how to deal the customers. He knows very well how to please them. As a result, he earned very good income to live happily. As the marketplace is emptying and the lights are being put out, a stranger named Guru Nayak appears. In the darkness, neither can see much of the other's face. Seeing the opportunity for one more client, the astrologer invites Guru Nayak to sit and chat. The stranger does so, but is instantly doubtful of the astrologer. He aggressively bets that the astrologer cannot tell him anything true or worthwhile. They bargain the price and the astrologer agrees. However, when Guru Nayak lights a cheroot, the astrologer catches a brief glimpse of the man's face and is filled with fear. Cheroot means a cigar with both ends open. He tries to get out of the bet or wager, but Guru Nayak holds him to it and will not let him leave. ഒരു കസ്റ്റമറിനെ കിട്ടിയ സന്തോഷത്തിലാണ് ഇരുട്ടായിട്ടും അസ്ട്രോളജർ ഗുരുനായക്കിനെ വിളിച്ചു വരുത്തിയത്. ഗുരുനായക്ക് തൻ്റെ ഭാവി കേൾക്കാനായിട്ട് അസ്ട്രോളജറിൻ്റെ മുന്നിൽ ഇരിക്കുമ്പോൾ തീർച്ചയായിട്ടും അസ്ട്രോളജറിനെ തൻ്റെ മുന്നിലിരിക്കുന്ന ഗുരുനായക്കിൻ്റെ മുഖം വ്യക്തമായി കാണാൻ കഴിയുമായിരുന്നില്ല. എന്നാൽ ഗുരുനായക്ക് സിഗരറ്റ് വലിക്കാൻ തുടങ്ങിയപ്പോഴാണ് മുന്നിലിരിക്കുന്ന വ്യക്തിയെ അസ്ട്രോളജർ വ്യക്തമായി കാണുന്നത്. അതുകൊണ്ടാണ് അസ്ട്രോളജർ ഗുരുനായക്കിനെ പേടിപൂർവം ഒഴിവാക്കാനായിട്ട് ശ്രമിക്കുന്നത്. But Guru Nayak was not at all ready to leave. The astrologer tries his usual tack of vague, self-affirming advice. But Guru Nayak will have none of it. The astrologer sincerely prays for a moment and then changes course. He reveals to Guru Nayak that he knows he was once stabbed through the chest and left for dead, and that now Guru Nayak is here searching for his assailant or attacker. He even reveals that he knows Guru Nayak's name, something he attributes to his cosmic wisdom. Guru Nayak is greatly excited by all of this, believing the astrologer to truly be all-knowing. He presses the astrologer for whereabouts of the man who stabbed him so that he can have his revenge. The astrologer tells him that he died several months ago, crushed by an oncoming lorry. Guru Nanak is frustrated by this, but satisfied that at least his attacker died terribly. He gives the astrologer his money and leaves. The astrologer arrives home late at night and shows his wife the money he has made, becoming briefly bitter when he realizes that although Guru Nanak has paid him a great sum, it is not quite as much as promised. Even so, his wife is thrilled. As they lie down to sleep, the astrologer reveals to his wife that a great burden has been lifted off his shoulders. Years ago, the astrologer was the one to stab Guru Nanak and leave him for dead, which forced him to flee his home and make a new life as a fraudulent astrologer. He had thought himself to be a murderer, but was now content that he had not in fact taken a life. Satisfied by this, he goes to sleep.
An astrologer's day. Punctually at midday, he opened his bag and spread out his professional equipment, which consisted of a dozen cowrie shells, a square piece of cloth with obscure mystic charts on it, a notebook, and a bundle of Palmyra writing. His forehead was resplendent with sacred ash and vermilion, and his eyes sparkled with a sharp abnormal gleam, which was really an outcome of a continual searching look for customers, but which his simple clients took to be a prophetic light and felt comforted. The power of his eyes was considerably enhanced by their position, placed as they were between the painted forehead and the dark whiskers which streamed down his cheeks. Even a half-wit's eyes would sparkle in such a setting. To crown the effect, he wore a saffron-colored turban around his head. This color scheme never failed. People were attracted to him as bees are attracted to cosmos or dahlia stalks. He sat under the boughs of a spreading tamarind tree which flanked a path running through the town hall park. It was a remarkable place in many ways. A surging crowd was always moving up and down this narrow road morning till night. A variety of trades and occupations was represented all along its way: medicine sellers, sellers of stolen hardware and junk, magicians, and above all an auctioneer of cheap cloth who created enough din all day to attract the whole town. Next to him in vociferousness came a vendor of fried groundnut, who gave his ware a fancy name each day, calling it Bombay ice cream one day, and on the next Delhi almond, and on the third Raja's delicacy, and so on. And people flocked to him. A considerable portion of this crowd dallied before the astrologer too. The astrologer transacted his business by the light of a flare, which crackled and smoked up above the groundnut heap nearby. Half the enchantment of the place was due to the fact that it did not have the benefit of municipal lighting. The place was lit up by sharp lights. One or two had hissing gas lights, some had naked flares stuck on poles, some were lit up by old cycle lamps, and one or two, like the astrologers, managed without lights of their own. It was a bewildering crisscross of light rays and moving shadows. This suited the astrologer very well, for the simple reason that he had not in the least intended to be an astrologer when he began life. And he knew no more of what was going to happen to others than he knew what was going to happen to himself next minute. He was much a stranger to the stars, as were his innocent customers. Yet he said things which pleased and astonished everyone. That was more a matter of study, practice, and shrewd guesswork. All the same, it was as much an honest man's labor as any other, and he deserved the wages he carried home at the end of the day. He had left his village without any previous thought or plan. If he had continued there, he would have carried on the work of his forefathers, namely tilling the land, living, marrying, and ripening in his cornfield and ancestral home. But that was not to be. He had to leave home without telling anyone, and he could not rest till he left it behind a couple of 100 miles. To a villager it is a great deal, as if an ocean flowed between. He had a working analysis of mankind's troubles, marriage, money, and the tangles of human ties. Long practice had sharpened his perception. Within 5 minutes he understood what was wrong. He charged 3 pies per question, never opened his mouth till the other had spoken for at least 10 minutes, which provided him enough stuff for a dozen answers and advice. When he told the person before him, gazing at his palm,
"In many ways, you are not getting the fullest results for your efforts."
9 out of 10 were disposed to agree with him. Or he questioned,
"Is there any woman in your family, maybe even a distant relative, who is not well disposed towards you?"
Or he gave an analysis of character.
"Most of your troubles are due to your nature. How can you be otherwise with Saturn, where he is? You have an impetuous nature and a rough exterior."
This endeared him to their hearts immediately, for even the mildest of us loves to think that he has a forbidding exterior. The nuts vendor blew out his flare and rose to go. This was a signal for the astrologer to bundle up too, since it left him in darkness except for a little shaft of green light which strayed in from somewhere and touched the ground before him. He picked up his cowrie shells and paraphernalia and was putting them back into his bag when the green shaft of light was blotted out. He looked up and saw a man standing in front of him. He sensed a possible client and said,
"You look so careworn. It will do you good to sit down for a while and chat with me."
The other grumbled some reply vaguely. The astrologer pressed his invitation, whereupon the other thrust his palm under his nose, saying,
"You call yourself an astrologer?"
The astrologer felt challenged and said, tilting the other's palm towards the green shaft of light,
"Yours is a nature." "Oh, stop that!
The other said.
Tell me something worthwhile."
Our friend felt piqued.
"I charge only 3 pies per question, and what you get ought to be good enough for your money."
At this time the other withdrew his arm, took out an anna, and flung it out to him, saying,
"I have some questions to ask. If I prove you are bluffing, you must return that anna to me with interest. If you find my answers satisfactory, will you give me 5 rupees? No? Or will you give me 8 annas? All right, provided you give me twice as much if you are wrong,"
said the stranger. This pact was accepted after a little further argument. The astrologer sent up a prayer to heaven as the other lit a cheroot. The astrologer caught a glimpse of his face by the match light. There was a pause as cars hooted on the road. Jutka drivers swore at their horses, and the babble of the crowd agitated the semi-darkness of the park. The other sat down, sucking his cheroot, puffing out, sat there ruthlessly. The astrologer felt very uncomfortable.
"Here, take your anna back. I'm not used to such challenges. It is late for me today."
He made preparations to bundle up. The other held his wrist and said,
"You can't get out of it now. You dragged me in while I was passing."
The astrologer shivered in his grip, and his voice shook and became faint.
Leave me today. I will speak to you tomorrow.
The other thrust his palm in his face and said,
Challenge is a challenge. Go on.
The astrologer proceeded with his throat drying up.
There is a woman.
Said the other.
Stop! I don't want all that. Shall I succeed in my present search or not? Answer this and go. Otherwise, I will not let you go till you disgorge all your coins.
The astrologer muttered a few incantations and replied,
All right, I will speak. But will you give me a rupee if what I say is convincing? Otherwise, I will not open my mouth, and you may do what you like.
After a good deal of haggling, the other agreed. The astrologer said,
You were left for dead. Am I right? Ah, tell me more. A knife has passed through you once.
Said the astrologer.
Good fellow. He bared his chest to show his scar. What else? And then you were pushed into a well nearby in the field. You were left for dead. I should have been dead if some passerby had not chanced to peep into the well.
Exclaimed the other, overwhelmed by enthusiasm.
When shall I get at him?
He asked, clenching his fist.
In the next word,
Answered the astrologer.
He died 4 months ago in a far-off town. You will never see any more of him.
The other groaned on hearing it. The astrologer proceeded.
Guru Nayak, you know my name, as I know all other things. Guru Nayak, listen carefully to what I have to say. Your village is 2 days' journey due north of this town. Take the next train and be gone. I see great danger once again to your life if you go from home. He took out a pinch of sacred ash and held it. Rub it on your forehead and go home. Never travel southwards again, and you will live to be 100. Why should I leave home again? I was only going away now, and then to look for him, and to choke out his life if I met him.
He shook his head regretfully.
He has escaped my hands. I hope he died as he deserved. Yes,
Said the astrologer.
he was crushed under a lorry.
The other looked gratified to hear it. The place was deserted by the time the astrologer picked up his articles and put them into his bag. The green shaft was also gone, leaving the place in darkness and silence. The stranger had gone off into the night after giving the astrologer a handful of coins. It was nearly midnight when the astrologer reached home. His wife was waiting for him at the door and demanded an explanation. He flung the coins at her and said,
Count them again. One man gave all that.
12.5 annas.
She said, counting. She was overjoyed.
I can buy some jaggery and coconut tomorrow. The child has been asking for sweets for so many days now. I will prepare some nice stuff for her.
The swine has cheated me. He promised me a rupee.
Said the astrologer. She looked up at him.
You look worried. What is wrong?
Nothing.
After dinner, sitting on the pole, he told her.
Do you know, a great load is gone from me today. I thought I had the blood of a man on my hands all these years. That was the reason why I ran away from home, settled here, and married you. He is alive.
She gasped.
You tried to kill?
Yes, in our village, when I was a youngster. We drank, gambled, and quarreled badly one day. Why think of it now? Time to sleep.
he said, yawning, and stretched himself on the pole.
I hope all of you have enjoyed the beautiful fiction An Astrologer's Day written by R.K. Narayan.